In April 2026, South Africa withdrew its draft national AI policy. Not because the policy was poorly conceived, not because the consultation process failed, but because the document was found to contain fabricated citations, references to research papers and academic sources that did not exist. They had been generated by AI. And here is what you need to know. A government's policy framework for regulating artificial intelligence, undermined by the very technology it was trying to regulate. If that does not capture the challenge Africa faces in governing AI right now, nothing will. And this is exactly what we are going to unpack today. The question I hear most frequently from senior government officials at AI governance forums across the continent is this: should we regulate AI first and risk slowing innovation, or let it develop and regulate later and risk losing control entirely? It is the wrong framing. And the reason it is the wrong framing is that AI is not coming to African governments. In many cases, it is already here. According to the OECD, African Union AI Dialogue Workshop held in Nairobi in March 2026, AI policy activity across African countries has accelerated dramatically since 2020. By April 2026, 16 African countries had adopted national AI strategies. A further 44 had enacted data protection laws, the foundational governance layer on which AI regulation must sit. The trajectory is clear, but the gap between strategy and implementation remains wide, and in that gap, real risks are accumulating. So what exactly is AI already doing inside African government systems? And where are the governance gaps most acute? Let me break it down. Key point 1. AI is already in African government systems. Let us start with the deployment reality. Because the conversation about AI governance in Africa is still often framed as a future problem. It is not. AI is already being used across African government systems for tax administration and revenue collection, with Kenya Revenue Authority and the South African Revenue Service both deploying machine learning models to detect evasion patterns. For identity verification with biometric AI systems embedded in digital ID infrastructure across Rwanda, Nigeria and Ethiopia. For agriculture forecasting with AI-driven crop yield and climate models informing government subsidy decisions in Ghana, Kenya and Tanzania. And for public health surveillance with AI models used to track disease outbreaks and allocate health resources across multiple African health ministries. These are not pilots. These are operational systems affecting real people's access to services, tax obligations, identity records and livelihoods. And in most cases, they are operating without clear legal frameworks, explainability requirements, or accountability mechanisms that would allow a citizen to understand, let alone challenge, an AI-driven decision that affects them. Consider a smallholder farmer in northern Ghana. An AI model flags her subsidy application as potentially fraudulent based on a pattern match she cannot see, cannot interrogate, and has no legal mechanism to appeal. She is not told which algorithm made the decision or why. She receives no subsidy, her crop fails. This is not a hypothetical. It is the logical consequence of deploying AI in high-stakes government decisions without a governance framework that protects the people those decisions affect. Key point 2. The regulatory landscape, progress and gaps. Now, let me give you an honest picture of where the regulatory landscape actually stands, because it is more advanced than many people assume and more fragmented than it needs to be. The African Union's continental AI strategy was adopted in July 2024 and is now in phase 1 implementation, focused on creating governance frameworks, national AI strategies, resource mobilization and capacity building across all 55 member states. Phase 1 runs through 2026. At the national level, the picture is varied and rapidly evolving. Kenya introduced its national AI strategy in March 2025, allocating 152 billion Kenyan shillings, approximately 1.14 billion US dollars, over 5 years, and tabled its AI bill in April 2026, making it one of the first African countries to move toward binding AI legislation. Nigeria leaped 31 places in the 2025 Government AI Readiness Index to reach 72nd globally, a remarkable improvement driven by NITDA's accelerating digital governance agenda. Rwanda signed a trilateral MOU with the UAE and Malaysia in 2025 to collaborate on AI governance, skills development, and ethical innovation. Ghana launched its national AI strategy alongside public sector training programs in April 2026, and Mauritius adopted its AI for Mauritius strategy in February 2026, linking AI directly to long-term economic planning. This is real and meaningful progress. But here is where the honest assessment requires us to name the gaps directly. First, most African countries are still operating in what analysts call a wait-and-watch regulatory posture. By April 2026, only a handful had moved toward binding AI legislation. The majority are still in strategy and framework territory. And strategies without enforcement mechanisms are ultimately aspirations. Second, the South Africa episode is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of a broader challenge. Governments are being asked to regulate AI at the same time that AI is accelerating faster than their institutional capacity to understand, monitor, and govern it. According to the ECOFIN agency's April 2026 analysis, enforcement remains uneven across the continent, despite rising regulatory crackdowns in key markets. Third, the risk of regulatory fragmentation is real. Without harmonized AI governance frameworks across regional economic communities, African countries risk creating a patchwork of conflicting rules that increases compliance costs for businesses, creates arbitrage opportunities for bad actors, and weakens the continent's collective bargaining position in global AI governance forums. So what does getting AI governance right in Africa actually look like? And what must governments prioritize right now? Here are 5 concrete actions grounded in what the evidence tells us. The strategic insight. Here is the strategic reframe I want every policymaker and regulator watching this to hold on to. AI governance in Africa is not a technology regulation problem. It is a sovereignty problem, an accountability problem, and an institutional capacity problem, all at the same time. The EU Continental AI Strategy is explicit on this point. AI systems should reflect Africa's diversity, languages, cultures, histories, and geographical contexts. That is not a soft aspiration. It is a hard design requirement. An AI system trained on datasets that do not reflect African realities will produce outputs that do not serve African citizens, regardless of how sophisticated the underlying model is. And here is the geopolitical dimension that every government needs to understand. The countries and companies that are building the AI systems being deployed in African governments right now, the training data, the models, the infrastructure, the cloud platforms, are overwhelmingly not African. That means the values, assumptions, and priorities embedded in those systems are also not African. Governing AI in Africa is at its core a question of whether Africa will shape its own digital future or have it shaped for it. The OECD-UAI dialogue in Nairobi in March 2026 was explicit. Effective AI governance in Africa requires not just regulatory frameworks, but the strengthening of the technical, institutional, and human systems that enable their effective implementation. Regulation without capacity is performance. Capacity without regulation is risk. So what must African governments actually do? Here are 5 actions that can close the gap between where Africa is and where it needs to be on AI governance. The practical takeaways. 1. Adopt a risk-based regulatory approach. Not all AI applications carry the same risk. An AI system making subsidy decisions that affect a farmer's livelihood is categorically different from an AI system recommending a playlist. African AI governance frameworks must prioritize high-stakes, high-risk applications in tax, identity, health, justice, and social protection, and apply binding accountability requirements there first. Kenya's AI bill and Nigeria's draft AI legislation are both moving in this direction. Every African government should be following their lead. 2. Build AI literacy inside government before building AI regulation. The South Africa citation scandal is a reminder that governments cannot effectively regulate what they do not understand. Every AI governance framework must be paired with a capacity-building program that trains the officials who will implement and enforce it. This is not optional, it is foundational. 3. Require explainability and appeal rights for AI-driven government decisions. Any AI system used to make or inform decisions that affect citizens' rights, benefits, or obligations must be required by law to be explainable, and citizens must have a meaningful right to appeal those decisions. This is the minimum accountability standard. Without it, AI in government is a black box with power over people's lives. 4. Invest in African AI datasets, models, and research capacity. The AU Continental AI strategy is explicit. AI systems should reflect African languages, cultures, and contexts. That requires African training data, African research institutions, and African AI development capacity. Initiatives like Masakane, which is building African language AI resources, and the proposed AI 10 billion initiative from the Nairobi AI Forum 2026 are exactly the kind of investments that create long-term AI sovereignty. 5. Coordinate at the regional and continental level, urgently. The fragmentation risk is real. The African Union's continental AI strategy provides the overarching framework, but regional economic communities, EAC, ECOWAS, SADC, need to translate that into harmonized, enforceable standards that work across borders. The alternative is a continent of 54 separate AI regulatory regimes that collectively add up to less than the sum of their parts. Conclusion. AI is not coming to African governments. In many systems, it is already there, making decisions, shaping outcomes, and affecting lives. The question is not whether Africa will govern AI. The question is whether it will govern it on its own terms, with frameworks that serve its citizens, or whether it will govern it reactively, after the harm is already done. The window to get this right is open, but it will not stay open forever. If this video sharpened your thinking on AI governance, share it with one person in your network who is making these decisions. Make sure you subscribe and turn on the notification. I will see you in the next video, which is showing on your screen now. And thank you for watching.